Kenya, Senegal, good afternoon to you. Eswatini, good afternoon, Africa. Happy Friday to you. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This is where you get the African perspective. It's where we meet to look at the latest in news, sport, and business. We start off at this 4 p.m. hour with the latest local, continental, and international news. Here is Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Looking at your top stories, Madagascar president says he is ready for dialogue, and insulting the president in Tunisia prompts a death sentence. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina says he is ready to listen to find solutions to problems facing the poor island nation, but has ignored calls for his resignation by a nationwide youth-led protest movement. Speaking in a speech broadcast on his Facebook page earlier today, Rajoelina said without providing evidence that some politicians were plotting to take advantage of the protests and had considered staging a coup. Inspired by similar Gen Z demonstrations in Kenya and Nepal, the protests have grown since last week into the largest wave of unrest that Madagascar has seen in years. The United Nations says at least 22 people have been killed and more than 100 injured. All security arrangements are in place to ensure the safety of all participants at the Parliament's Ad Hoc Committee on National Safety in South Africa. The committee was established to look into allegations raised by the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, on criminal infiltration of the criminal justice system. Mkhwanazi will be the first witness to appear before MPs next week. He is expected to be in the hot seat over 2 days. The committee received a short safety briefing from Parliament's Chief of Security, Lieutenant General Sam Shitlhabane.
We can be able to say safely we are ready to resume in terms of security arrangement with the ad hoc committee. In terms of the venue itself, which is a Good Hope Chamber, it is already a security venue. So what we're bringing is just additional security, elements that would support.
The South African government has called on the Israeli government to release South African citizens and other nationals who are detained during the Israelis' military interception of the global Sumud flotilla. DERCO spokesperson Crispin Piri says that those detained did not violate any international law.
As we understand it now, they are kept in custody and processes are underway to ensure that they are deported. We are monitoring those processes. We reiterate the call for our citizens to be released. They've done absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, they are compliant with international law, which clearly states that, in this instance, our case from the ICJ clearly states in its provisional measures that there should be no prohibition to humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. And this civilian-led initiative sought to do exactly that.
Both parents, regardless of gender, sex, color, or circumstances, will now be entitled to equal parental leave of 4 months and then 10 days that they can share. The Constitutional Court in South Africa has unanimously confirmed the constitutional invalidity of sections of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. It found that provision in the Act dealing with the parental leave entitlement of both mothers and fathers amounted to unfair discrimination. The sections have been successfully challenged in the High Court in Johannesburg by Werner van Wyk and Ika van Wyk after van Wyk approached his employer with a request for paternity leave, and he was informed that he was only eligible to 10 days parental leave. Justice Zukisa Qishi has delivered the unanimous Concord judgment.
This court finds that the discrimination caused by the impugned provisions is unfair and unconstitutional. The protection of birth mothers to the exclusion of other parents has the unfortunate consequence of perpetrating the assumption that women are and should be the primary caregivers of children. The father is marginalized and deprived of the opportunity to involve himself as a parent in the upbringing of the baby during the early stages of life.
Lastly, a Tunisian man has been sentenced to death on charges of insulting the president and assaulting state security through posts on social media. The ruling is unprecedented in Tunisia, where restrictions on free speech have been tightened since President Kais Saied seized almost all powers in 2021. The judgment has, however, been appealed. The sentence immediately sparked a wave of criticism and ridicule on social media amongst activists and ordinary Tunisians. Recapping on your top stories, Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina says he is ready to listen to find solution to problems facing the poor island nations, but has ignored calls for his resignation by a nationwide youth-led protest movement. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this summer, the ICC Women's Cricket World Cup has opened with a successful and a powerful commercial statement, attracting various premium sponsors, while we'll also unpack the tourism benefits associated with Rwanda's latest partnership with the US soccer football teams, the LA Clippers as well as the LA Rams. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 7 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Here's what we've got in store for you today. Shaking things up a little bit, we usually have our business roundup every week with Victor Khamusana a little bit later on in the hour, just closer to 5 o'clock. But we're switching things up a bit, and we're going to be starting with that today. We'll be looking at stories coming out of Senegal, the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as Ethiopia and Mali. Also, you will remember that it was in April that the ZIG was launched. That's April last year, 2024. And it's more than a year that it has been operational. And we're going to be looking at how it has performed over the past year and a bit. There is a bid in order to establish a monocurrency in Zimbabwe, getting rid of the US dollar completely for domestic transactions and then focusing on the ZIG. We'll be speaking to a Zimbabwean-based independent economist regarding the delays that are being experienced as far as the phasing out of the US dollar and the sole utilization of the ZIG as Zimbabwe's currency. These and a whole lot more stories coming up for you this afternoon on Africa in Business. And just a reminder that we are available on all the various social media platforms on X, Instagram and YouTube. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook, we are at Channel Africa. One question that I would like to ask is, if you are based in Zimbabwe, how have you found the usage of the ZIG, and how predominant is the current usage of the US dollar? Do you think it's practical that the country will move completely from a US dollar-based economy to one that is ZIG-based? Your experiences on the ground very much appreciated, and we'll look out for your comments on the various social media platforms.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
We begin here this afternoon with a look at South Africa's municipalities. They are currently under fire. This is after the Auditor General, Tsakani Maluleke, revealed widespread failures in financial management. Her report shows that 219 municipalities relied on consultants for financial reporting, yet many still produced poor quality statements. She also flagged that more than 80% of audit committees and internal audit units were ineffective, while 50 municipalities operated without chief financial officers in the 2023-2024 financial year. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Simosa has more.
At the local government Indaba in Johannesburg, Auditor General Tsakani Maluleke shared startling figures pointing to persistent failures in municipal governance. She noted that despite the same problems being flagged year after year, there are few consequences for poor performance, a trend that reflects a broader culture of weak accountability in local government. But why is that so many municipalities rely on consultants for financial reporting, yet still deliver poor quality statements? Managing Director at Reputation First, Tshepo Matseba, shares his perspective.
The Auditor General is correct in pointing out that municipalities are spending billions on consultants, but the results are actually not showing in the audits. And in that sense, to rebuild trust, municipalities would need to be upfront with residents with regards to why consultants are hired and what value they are bringing to the party. People don't really want jargon. They want to know how the spending helps improve service delivery in their own communities. So, in a sense, there's a deeper issue as well, where municipalities must urgently address the skills gaps, particularly in financial management and operational performance.
He also outlined some practical mechanisms to deal with this challenge,
without which, the right skills will not be in place, and therefore municipalities would remain heavily reliant on consultants, and they will struggle to deliver sustainable results. So, but at the same time, local government must actually change the narrative and story around its performance through mechanisms such as strategic communication and branding. Local government can actually help. Those mechanisms can help only if communication reflects real progress. So that means you must fix the water leaks, improve buildings, maintain the roads.
With 50 municipalities operating without CFOs, Matseba says this has an impact on leadership gap, service delivery, and the overall stability of local government finances.
In fact, when citizens see action on the ground, they hear consistent messages about this progress and quality service. That's when confidence in municipalities can return. And so municipal managers and I think local government overall has the responsibility to not only make promises, but to ensure that they fulfill those promises. But those promises can only be fulfilled when you have a competent workforce, competent managers who are confident and experienced and can actually do the job. That's the only time when things can change.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
AUSISA, the Association of Water and Sanitation Institution of South Africa, is a platform uniting Africa's water professionals. This November, Africa leads the conversation on water and sanitation. Join global and African leaders at the AUSISA Africa and Global South Dialogue 2025 from the 9th till the 12th of November at the Emperor's Palace, Johannesburg. From policy innovation, this is where action meets collaboration for a water-secure future. Register today at ausisa-watersan-dialogue.org or follow at AUSISA on social media. AUSISA, working together for sustainable water and sanitation security in Africa. Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa. It's gone exactly 14 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Now for our weekly business roundup of the business news that made headlines across the African continent, we are joined this afternoon by Victor Khumuswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. Victor is also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. Victor, great to be talking to you in our earlier time slot.
Earlier the better, Thami.
Good afternoon, especially for a Friday. We just want to make sure that your weekend, starts off a little bit earlier.
Exactly. You don't have to dig too deep to find me because, you never know.
You never know. Yeah. Well, straight into business. Let's take a look at Senegal. They currently have one oil refinery that processes around 30,000 barrels of crude oil a day. Talk to us about their plans for the second oil refinery.
Yeah, out of the energy conference that was taking place in Cape Town, all kinds of announcements getting made, including one by the minister of, I think it's the Ministry of Hydrocarbons in Senegal. This is a $5 billion investment, Thami, which I probably will be divided into 2 installments to increase the capacity to 4 million tons, so that by 2029 there should be much more capacity. Investors, not surprisingly, coming from China and Turkey and South Korea. That's quite a fine mix. If you just think about the alliance between China and North Korea, you would imagine that they would be more leaning towards North Korea or the Democratic Republic of Korea. But when it comes to investment, money seems to just chase the best returns. But it's a minority stake that will be now held by Petrosen, which is a state-owned entity. The rest will be operated by Woodside Energy, which is an Australian company.
I mean, how likely are they going to achieve this 4 million tons by 2029? Because at the moment they're producing 1.5 million with the one oil refinery they have.
It's amazing what capital investment can achieve. I mean, if you look at the amount of money, 5 billion is not small change. So often when you see an investment like this, they are either renewing equipment, they are adding more capacity, or they are strengthening whatever infrastructure that goes with this, are able to operate longer hours, replace equipment that is not functioning properly. So the oil is there. As long as you have the reserves and you have the stock feed, you should be able to do that. The amount of that indicates the demand in Senegal and the demand from the ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. Remember, we talked about Dangote and his 650,000 barrels per day refinery, and he's already exporting to the United States, which means he's not only looking at the West African market.
Let's look at some changes taking place at Barrick. You'll remember Mark Bristow, he became the CEO and president after the merger between Barrick and Randgold in 2019. But a sudden resignation or stepping down?
Mercurial Mark, they call him that, Mercurial Mark. He's quite a tough customer, Mark Bristow. I mean, he founded Randgold and ran it for quite a while in the late 80s, I think, and he's a respected miner, no question. But it looks like there's not much chemistry between him and John Thornton. At the heart of this, the way the report goes by Reuters, is that Mali had been very hostile towards mining companies, and they were saying, we want a larger share of your business, the free carry. It has been happening now in Burkina Faso that companies are increasing their free carry, which is the part given to the government of the country where they're operating, from 10% to 15%. And it looked like Mark Bristow resisted that, and as a result, there were 3 tons of gold that were seized at one stage. The renewal of license that is due in 2026 is hanging in the balance. I think that is a bigger problem. Since the 2021 coup, there has been this kind of tension, but because the renewal of the license is coming in February next year, I think the chairman, John Thornton, had to say, Mark, unless you can show that your economic diplomacy or your, I call it government relations, will improve, we have to let you go, because you might end up losing the actual license of operating. And if you don't have a license in a country like that, you're not going to be able to take anybody to court. Or even if you do, that litigation could take a much longer time.
And I see Mark Hill has now been appointed as the interim CEO as well as COO. What do we know about him?
Not much, but look, mining companies often have a very huge pipeline. It's almost like the way they mine the ore and they crush it, and there's always something on the conveyor belt, but I'm afraid I don't know much. Apologies.
No, looking at the Republic of Congo, we know that gas is pretty much at the heart of the national development agenda, and regulations are expected to change regarding some gas codes this month.
Yeah, they're realizing that unless they change their regulations about licensing and a whole lot of things, they are not going to attract the right kind of investment. This is Congo Brazzaville, by the way. So this new floating liquefied natural gas is expected to be by November 2025 already underway. The interesting thing is ENI, the Italian company, the offshore Marine 12 concession, they moved some investment or capacity out of China. I don't quite know what is behind that, but it just tells you something that Congo Brazzaville, unlike the DRC, has not had as much instability. So maybe it's becoming more and more attractive. And the hydrocarbons, for all the talk we are hearing about cleaner energy, you are still going to have to drill. And if you're talking natural gas, it's much cleaner than the other forms of petroleum or hydrocarbon resources. So it makes sense that the oil minister, Bruno Ito, would have announced this, and it's just showing you the diversity of the investors. Italian, you have Japanese, South Korean, you have American, you have European, all kinds of oil majors coming in, descending on the resource base that is Africa.
And as we wrap up our top business stories, developments around the $3 billion fertilizer plant in Ethiopia.
Yeah. In Ethiopia. And, Ethiopia is a huge agriculture economy, Thami. Agriculture is still the biggest employer, the largest employer in terms of the number of people it employs in Africa. The limitation is the productivity is compromised by two things. The lack of use of technology, so equipment like tractors, people are still not using enough tractors. But the second thing is the use of fertilizers. So this fertilizer manufacturing plant is going to add exactly that. The farmers are already there, but to be able to increase their yield and get more certainty in the production, the $3 billion project will come in handy. Ethiopia is no stranger to multi-billion-dollar investments, having just launched the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which cost over $4 billion.
Victor Khumsana, always a pleasure. Thank you for a great roundup of the leading business stories on the African continent.
It's a pleasure. Have a good weekend.
Have a great one. Thank you. That's Victor Khumsana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He's also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. That's all the top business stories coming out of the continent for this week.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Annie Kalondi sur Channel Africa.
Comment est-ce que les militants et sympathisants du parti Les Transformateurs ont-ils réagi face à la condamnation de Succès Masra?
La condamnation de Succès Masra ne nous a pas surpris et les militants transformateurs ont été bouleversés et indignés étant donné que le verdict est un verdict lourd, illégal, injuste et donc face à la répression dans laquelle le peuple tchadien est confronté, les militants transformateurs se sont résignés de ne pouvoir pas sortir manifester. Et donc, c'est une situation totalement absurde pour un pays. Et aujourd'hui, nous célébrons le 11 août, fête de l'indépendance. On pensait que le verdict allait être plus ou moins clément, mais le verdict est sévère.
Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
We turn our attention now to Zimbabwe, where the International Monetary Fund says Zimbabwe needs to encourage ZiG demand and also provide clarity on its mono-currency transitional plan. This as the country phases out domestic use of the US dollar. Zimbabwe introduced the ZiG in April of last year. This was backed by gold as well as other precious metals. However, the currency hasn't quite found wide acceptance in the market. To give us a greater perspective on its performance, its highs and its lows, as well as prospects, joining us this afternoon is Vince Musewe, a Zimbabwean-based independent economist. Great to have you on African Business. Welcome, Vincent.
Hi there.
Great to have you with us. So when we take a look at the ZiG, what exactly is causing the delays in the phasing out of the dollar and making the ZiG the sole currency?
Well, you know what? It's a difficult transition from the US dollar to the ZiG. I mean, it has happened worldwide. Any country that has tried to de-dollarize has failed to completely de-dollarize. And they've come up with various hybrids, of how to do it. You must remember that there is a serious psychological kind of rejection of the ZiG simply because of the past where people had U.S. deposits in their bank accounts and they were converted into a local currency, and the local currency collapsed. So people lost a lot of money in 2008 and 2009. So there's serious psychological kind of resistance to say, no, not again. So, regardless that the policymakers want us to get there, there are various things that have to be in place before you create the market confidence, because this really should not be imposed on the market. The market should be confident enough to adopt the currency, and use it without being forced to or, being, pushed to actually do it.
I mean, you talk about the psychological barrier, which is a real fear because people did go through this massive devaluation of their currency. So what exactly is it going to take for the ZiG to gain a level of stature, at least in the eyes of Zimbabweans?
Well, right. Okay, the first thing is that, I always say it's like when you go through trauma, you're not going to get normal until you got some counseling, okay? So there's fundamental issue here. There's lack of trust between citizens and the government in the sense that they do not believe that this government will do whatever they do in the interest of citizens. Citizens are very skeptical, given the historical issue. The other thing is that those who lost have never been compensated, for the loss. I mean, I think some have been, but there's no longer be a complete acknowledgement that, listen, we messed up and we're sorry and it won't happen again, and we are compensating you. And number three is that, you see, we have a situation in Zimbabwe which is it's an high import economy, where a lot of things are imported. I mean, for your information, we even import tissue paper and toothpicks, right, into the country. So taking away that foreign currency, what does it mean? Imagine that I'm a trader, I'm importing stuff using the US dollar, and suddenly I don't have access to the US dollar, but I need to import. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the bank and ask them if I can get US dollars, right? If the bank doesn't have, what am I going to do? I'm going to ask someone who has some US dollars somewhere to help me and say, listen, can I borrow you? Can I use your US dollars? And if I have them, I will say to the guy, listen, the bank is giving you 26. I will give you a 30 if you want, because I want to make a profit on it. And the buyer will then say, oh, okay, I'd rather buy it at 30. So we go back again to creating a black parallel market simply because we don't have enough foreign currency in the country. These are the things that we have to watch. Don't
Vince,
want to go back there.
Yeah. Vince, the IMF is saying that they need clarity as far as the transitioning from the US dollar to the ZiG. What type of clarity might they be seeking on the monocurrency transition plan?
Yeah, well, the IMF always kind of speaks tongue-in-cheek, kind of. Let me tell you, there are fundamental issues that have to be in place before you can actually introduce a monocurrency. It's not only monetary policy, because monetary policy is just a little measure of it. The key issue is the issue of debt. This government owes about $21 billion US dollars, right? 12 for which they owe overseas and $8 billion that they owe here. Right now, if we don't have the US dollar, what are they going to do? They're going to have to source those US dollars elsewhere. Where is that money going to come from? And number two, once you convert into the monocurrency, there's a risk that this government will start printing money in order to retire its local debt. And that is what caused the hyperinflation in the past. So that's what the IMF is talking about. There are other political things. You see, a currency is not only valued because of economics. It's also political issues. There's so much uncertainty going forward, fights going on. There's a lot of political uncertainty. You cannot create confidence in a situation like that. So those are the things that have to be sorted out before we can even begin to think of going to a monocurrency.
All right, we'll leave it at that, Vince, for this afternoon. Thank you so much as we focus on the transition and the transitional plan that Zimbabwe has had to put in place in order to transition from the US dollar to a completely ZiG-based economy in Zimbabwe. That's Vince Musewe, a Zimbabwe-based independent economist. Thank you, sir, for your time. He takes us to exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time, and we take you to the markets, where Chanduko Ligege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami, and good afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 23 in South Africa, Botswana 13 Pula 20, Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 23, Zambia 23 Kwacha 28. Kenya, the dollar is 128 shilling 441, Ethiopia 144 birr 621, Uganda 3,000 shilling 446, Tanzania 2,000 shilling 455. $1 in Nigeria is 1,478 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is 47 Egyptian pound 75. Tunisia, 2 dinar 89. Algeria, 128 dinar 673. Morocco, 9 dirham 06. Angola, 912 kwanza. The Congolese franc is 2,598. Commodities, gold is at $3,880, platinum at $1,604 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $64.44 a barrel. That's all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And from the sports desk, here's Musibudi Makura with the latest from the business of sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Sports on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It's a very good afternoon from the sports desk. We'll start here. So the Los Angeles Rams as well as the LA Clippers announced a sponsorship agreement earlier on this week with the Rwandan government, which for several years has been expanding its international sports presence while also facing accusations of trying to whitewash its decade-long record of human rights abuses. So as part of the deals, the Rams as well as the Clippers will promote tourism to the East African country. So visit Rwanda Rwanda. The marketing slogan for the Rwandan Development Board will be the exclusive jersey patch on the Clippers, while the Visit Rwanda will also be advertised in the Rams' home Sophie Stadium. So Seja Valari, who is the head of communication at the Rwandan Development Bank, explains just how the tourism benefits associated with this partnership will benefit Rwanda.
2018, we started the initiative of Visit Rwanda. Since then, we just doubled the revenue of tourism. We have that target, as you say, to 1 billion in 2029. So it's totally aligned because we achieved that without having a presence on the ground in US. And US is now actually the best markets in terms of visitors in Rwanda. So now we're going to have a visibility directly lead to our main markets, which is obviously will help to grow the market and the revenue in the future.
Onto the story now. The ICC Women's Cricket World Cup 2025 has opened with a powerful commercial statement attracting a roster of premium sponsors that reflects the tournament's rising stature as a standalone global property. So from technology powerhouse Google to the International Geological Institute, the sponsorship lineup also includes Unilever Limited, Rexona, as well as the State Bank of India, cutting across categories from tech as well as FMCG to banking as well as luxury. The diverse portfolio also underscores how brands increasingly view women's cricket as more than a sporting spectacle. It is now a high-value platform, this to connect with dynamic, engaged as well as high-intent audiences. So with the tournament being broadcast as well as streamed by GeoStar, brands have secured visibility across television, digital, connected TV, as well as in-stadium activations. Meanwhile, the deal also comes on the back of the ICC also announcing a landmark women's-only global partnership with Google. The collaboration will lead to the World Cricket Governing Body leveraging Google's advanced technology and commitment to supporting women's sports, enhancing fan engagement as well as increasing accessibility. The Lions also paves ways for fueling further growth and well as visibility of women's cricket following the announcement of the Unilever as the ICC's first global women's partner. So enhancing the fan experience in women's cricket as well as making it more dynamic, accessible as well as meaningful will be Google's products, including Android, Google Gemini, Google Play, as well as Google Pixel. On to some football news now. Tottenham Hotspur midfielder Rodrigo Bentancur has signed a new deal at the club. The Uruguay international has made 112 appearances for the club since joining them from Juventus back in 2022. The 28-year-old started at Spurs with the 28-year-old started as Spurs ended their 17-year trophy drought. This by beating Manchester United in the Europa League final just last season. Now, Tottenham Hotspur did not specify the length of his new deal, referring that it will be a long-term deal. And finally, two-time major champion Coco Gauff said on Thursday that more money for all players from the 4 Grand Slams would be for the long-term benefit of tennis. Now, a group of elite players, including the world number 3 Gauff, are pushing for a greater share of revenue, more benefits, as well as a bigger say in how slams are run. Now, 20 players signed a letter sent to the 4 Grand Slams back in March of this year demanding an increase in prize money and to be consulted on decisions that impacted them. The group also reportedly, excluding Novak Djokovic, signed a second letter earlier 2 months ago underlying their demand that slams pay into a player welfare fund to improve retirement as well as maternity benefits. Now, players say the share of revenue generated at Grand Slams is less than an ATP as well as WTA tournaments despite bringing in more money. Well, that's a wrap of your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. Have a great sporting weekend. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 4:39 Central African Time. A draft report by the Office of the Tax Ombudsman following a systemic investigation into alleged e-filing profile hijacking has found that there are challenges in the detection of fraud within the e-filing system. The Tax Ombudsman has also found that victims encounter limited support from the South African Revenue Services when trying to resolve e-filing profile hijacking cases. For more on this, we're joined this afternoon by Francois Viljoen, Specialist Systemic Investigations at the Office of the Tax Ombudsman. A very good afternoon to you, Francois. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
So how rampant are complaints regarding the e-filing profile hijacking that you've experienced during this period?
It has been very prevalent. So it all started before filing season started. Complaints started trickling into our office. And then when e-filing started this year, we also further noted an increase in complaints regarding e-filing profile hijacking. And if we look at the overall e-filing profile hijacking cases, it is quite significant. SARS has indicated that for a period of under 2 years, they have received just below 16,000 cases regarding e-filing profile hijacking. So it is quite a significant number. And currently, SARS has also indicated that on average, they receive an additional 387 cases a month pertaining to e-filing profile hijacking. So it is quite an issue that we deem to be significant.
I mean, the numbers that you're quoting are not minuscule at all. Can you take us through the e-filing profile hijacking investigation and how that was set up? And perhaps a bit more detail as well as to what the main things were that you were looking for and the indicators.
Yes, definitely. So for the investigation, we used a multifaceted approach. So firstly, we engaged both practitioners and taxpayers via survey to get a better understanding of what their experience was, firstly with how the e-filing profile hijacking occurred, and then also to get a better understanding of what was their experience when they reported this e-filing profile hijacking to SARS. So the first element was the survey that we conducted. A second element was that we did have wide consultations. And again, when we had wide consultations, it was various industry bodies, it was with SARS itself, it was with the Banking Association. So we consulted widely regarding this issue, including with SARS. And then we also looked at the complaints that we dealt with at our office relating to profile hijacking. So the third element that is discussed in the report is case studies. And from the case studies, we can then also pick up how that relates back to the findings from the survey, as well as the findings from consulting with SARS and other stakeholders.
You mentioned some of the findings there, Francois. Can you take us through some of those?
Yes. So we did find that personal income tax was mostly affected from this. And when we look at the personal income tax, we have to be cognizant that it is sometimes people that is supposed to get auto-assessed, which end up not getting auto-assessed with someone submitting returns, claiming refunds. So we did find a bulk of the issues related to personal income tax. And when we looked at personal income tax, the amounts involved was mostly below 10,000 Rand. We also then did see a lot of cases relating to VAT. And when we look at the VAT cases, we do find that the amounts involved tend to increase significantly. And what we also note with VAT, and it's not just with VAT cases, but also with companies' income tax cases, we do find that fraudsters would changed details of the directors and the public officers at the CIPC. And once they've changed these details at the CIPC, they go to SARS and then they change details at SARS and then also submit fraudulent companies' income tax returns and VAT returns.
I must say, Francois, I mean, listening to all of this, it really just echoes what your report found, that there are weak authentication processes, there are insider threats, low digital security awareness. I mean, for imposters or thieves to be able to get into SARS and the CIPC, those are all supposed to be very high security areas that cannot be easily accessed. But out of all of these, including the delayed response from SARS, which was flagged perhaps as the biggest single risk for taxpayers?
I think, firstly, that I would like to say it was prevalent when we started the investigation. Two-factor authentication wasn't a compulsory at that stage, and that was a big weakness in the system. Since then, SARS has made the two-factor authentication compulsory for all individual taxpayers. But we do find within a society where we do have SIM swaps in South Africa and fraud with SIM swaps, it's not necessarily always 100% foolproof that it will be effective. SARS has also moved to, or is in the process of moving to biometric systems to verify taxpayers, which I think will be a good system. And then when we look at individual taxpayers, they are sometimes very, very vulnerable in the light of some of them might not have the knowledge to file their own tax returns, and then they rely on other people to file their returns on their behalf. And we do find in some instances there will be bogus tax practitioners that once they then obtain the details of the individual taxpayers, they will submit fraudulent tax returns. And then lastly, I do think there's also maybe not enough education about phishing scams and the like. And we do sometimes find that taxpayers will get emails and they will think it is legit emails and they will click on those links. And once they start clicking on those links and submitting their personal details, that can also lead to their systems, their profiles being hacked. So there is a lot that is involved in all of this, and fraudsters become more advanced. And the one stage you think you implement something, it doesn't take fraudsters long to find a way to maybe breach that process that is set in place.
And I guess that's what calls for constant innovation and always trying to be a step ahead of them. Francois Viljoen, thank you so much for taking us through that report as well as some of the recommendations that have been put forward. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Francois Viljoen, Specialist Systemic Investigations at the Office of the Tax Ombud.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Now, Republican and Democrats continue to blame each other for the ongoing U.S. government shutdown that went into effect early on Wednesday as President Donald Trump ramps up threats to cut what he referred to as, I quote, democratic agencies, in addition to mass firings to the federal workforce. Senate Democrats have largely rejected funding legislation to keep the government open as they seek Republican concessions on healthcare policy, including a continuation of subsidies in the Affordable Care Act, which were due to expire at the end of the year. Republicans counter that Democrats are seeking to provide healthcare benefits to undocumented immigrants, a charge that Democrats have rejected as false. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
The shutdown affects hundreds of thousands of non-essential federal employees who are furloughed while many services are curtailed. from national parks to museums, among others. Most federal workers and members of the military will not be paid until the shutdown is over, as both major parties dig in. Hakeem Jeffries is leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives.
What we will not do is support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people. Over the last several months, Republicans have created a health care crisis in the United States of America, largest cut to Medicaid in American history, triggering the possibility of a $536 billion cut to Medicare if Congress does not act because of what happened with the One Big Ugly Bill. Republicans have refused to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, and as a result of that, millions of working-class Americans are going to experience skyrocketing premiums, copays, and deductibles at a time when America is already too expensive.
Republicans have signaled a willingness to engage on Democratic healthcare concerns, but only when the government is reopened, as they seek support from Senate Democrats to reach the 60-vote threshold to pass a clean, continuing resolution that would fund the government at existing levels until November 21st. Listen to Vice President J.D. Vance.
What they have done instead is to shut down the government because we won't give billions of dollars to healthcare funding for illegal aliens. That is what has actually happened. To the American people who are watching, the reason your government is shut down at this very minute is because, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of congressional Republicans and even a few moderate Democrats supported opening the government, the Chuck Schumer AOC wing of the Democratic Party shut down the government because they said to us, we will open the government, but only if you give billions of dollars of funding for health care for illegal aliens. That's a ridiculous proposition.
U.S. law prohibits undocumented immigrants from gaining access to federal healthcare benefits, as both sides seek to shape the narrative in this high-stakes political standoff, as Georgetown University government affairs analyst Matt Glassman explains.
Both parties have factions that really want to fight here, and the first thing leaders have to do is to demonstrate to those factions that they're fighting. Part of the reason I think we're in this shutdown is because Senator Schumer feels like a portion of his caucus in the Senate, and that is reflective of a portion of Democrats in the country, really just want someone to stand up to Trump and fight. And so demonstrating that fight is going to be stage one of this. And whether that lasts a day, 2 days, 3 days, or 5 days, that will come to an end, and people who just want to fight will be satisfied that you've shown some mettle here. And that sort of loosens up the negotiating room for others who actually want to strike bargaining deals.
That's Sharon Bryce Peace reporting there on the Republicans and Democrats and the federal government not approving the budget and shutting down. Takes us to exactly 4:52 Central African time. In just a moment, we turn our sights onto Nigeria.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria, the CBN, has announced a phased operational overhaul of the Nigerian fixed income market in a deliberate move to deepen transparency and efficiency in the financial ecosystem. In a statement, Oke Umeano, acting director of the Financial Markets Department at the CBN, says the first phase of the reform will see the central bank take full control of both the settlement process and the trading platform for fixed income transactions, and this will be from November of this year. For more on this, we joined on the line by Shuaibu Idris, economist and managing director at Timeline Consult Limited. A very good afternoon to you. Great to have you with us. Welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. Well done, good job.
Well, it's always great having you with us. So let's take a look perhaps at what the key motivations might be behind this shift. I mean, do you see this improving transparency and efficiency in the financial ecosystem? Ultimately, that's the goal, right?
Oh, well, that is what the banking regulator claims. But when you look at the financial subsector of the Nigerian economy today, you ask yourself, how many markets do we have per se. Number one, you can dimension the markets into maybe 2 or 3 markets. You have the stock exchange, the Nigerian exchange, the so-called Nigerian exchange. It's a self-regulatory kind of a market. Buying and selling are done regularly, daily basis, and there is reasonable level of transparency. What is the settlement and what are the mechanism of settlement? We used to have a 5-day settlement. We moved from 5 days to T3, what we call T3, meaning 3-day settlement. Now we are working towards a 2-day settlement. These are, businessmen and women managing that market. Has there been issues? Of course, there were issues, but we've been able to resolve that market. We have the second-tier market, which is also similar to the first market, the Nigerian exchange, and we have what we call, the SMDQ, FMDQ market, which is also largely, private sector driven. We have a company called, the interbank settlement scheme and the Nigerian bank settlement scheme, and we have interswitch. We have, other settlement mechanism and documentation mechanism. We have a company, standalone company called CSCS, Central Securities Clearing System. Now, all these institutions are privately, driven. They were started, except the stock exchange that was started by government and subsequently ceded to private sector. The rest were started and nurtured and run by government, with regulators having an oversight, like the Securities and Exchange Commission and other, regulatory agencies in Nigeria. One wonders, in an economy where you have this time-tested institution, why is the central bank just coming in today to say they want improvement in transparency and deepening of the market? Do we really need the central bank to come into that market to achieve those objectives?
So let me ask you this, Shabu, as we wrap up. What are the potential downsides or the risks from centralizing trading and settlement?
Well, the major player in that market, the fixed income market, is the Central Bank of Nigeria. So obviously, if it is managing that morally and ethically, is it right? Will it be right? Our major fear is manipulation of the interest and the demand and supply, and therefore the transparency for which the central bank is claiming that it intends to achieve may be compromised. And even when, the transparency is being done, justice is not supposed to be done, but it must be seen to have been done. When you are the judge, the complainant in a court and the lawyer, and you do all those, even if you are fair, just, and equitable, it is not likely that people and observers will
perceive
believe
that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Shabu, thank you very much for putting that perspective onto the table. Very much appreciated, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Have a good weekend.
You have a great one too. That's Shabu Idris, economist and managing director at Timeline Consult Limited, saying that, the perception of justice is also very important. You can't be both judge and jury. His views regarding the centralization of the centralization of trading and settlement. It's gone exactly 4:58 Central African Time. Bonjour.
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Restez connectés parce que tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique, nous parlerons de la montée de tension en Côte d'Ivoire avec l'interdiction de toute manifestation contestant l'exclusion des candidats d'opposition, mais aussi de l'enquête ouverte en Guinée pour déterminer les causes d'un incident, mais encore de la RDC, 6 mois de prison ferme à l'encontre d'un militant pro-démocratie. Ce sont les grands titres. Merci Thami.
Merci and bon weekend to
Bon
you.
weekend à toi aussi, Thami.
That's how we come to the end of this week's edition of Africa in Business from our entire team, Onel Nzinzi, Chanduko Ligeke, Mosebudi Makura, as well as from our production team, Mabo Boloka, as well as Miss Malika, and from the social media side as well. You have yourself a splendid weekend ahead. I'm Thami Ngubeni. It's 1 minute to 5.